Police of Reddit, what is the absolute worst crime scene you've come across? Please like and subscribe to support us. Not a cop, but I am in college to become one. One of my professors at the time worked homicide as a lieutenant at the precinct and brought in crime scene photos all the time to show us on the projector. One was of this 17-year-old kid who'd had his head caved in on the early 2000s. It was a pretty big case at the time in Philadelphia. He worked construction part-time and walked home every Friday with a couple of $100 in cash for his pay. His best friends, one girl and two guys, all in the 16 to 18 range, wanted to make a quick buck. The girl lured him to this regular meet-up spot for sex out near some woods. When he started taking his clothes off, the three friends jumped him. The 18-year-old guy, if I remember right, had a hammer, and his brother had a cinder block. The kid didn't stand a chance. His parents had to identify him based on the clothes he was wearing because there was practically nothing left of his face or hands, defensive wounds. The brother got tried as an adult and got 25 to life. The 18-year-old got life, the girl got 15 for ratting out the other two. I've seen some pretty gruesome murders and accidents. Saw a woman stabbed over 50 times. A guy whose head was completely caved in by his steering wheel. Plenty of suicides via shotgun to the mouth. The one that stands out to me the most wasn't fatal, and it wasn't even that gruesome. Some guy got high on PCP and thought everyone was a demon. An older woman, early 60s, woman was driving by, and he decided to fight her. Pulled her out of her car and pummeled her face. Knocked her teeth out, bruised her face real good, gave her brain damage. She was conscious throughout the entire ordeal, and I was the first on the scene. It shocked me because she was minding her own business when this asshole decided to ruin her life. It was random and unprovoked. If I'm not mistaken, she had to quit her job due to memory issues from the brain injury. On top of that, we had to fight the guy for a good 3 minutes until we got him into custody. He was a big guy and got roughed up pretty good, but he was feeling no pain at all. My taser had absolutely no effect. We only got him into cuffs when 6 officers held him down and pulled his arms into place. He then proceeded to spit blood on us. An older coworker told me this one. A man lived in an apartment with his 3 kids and wife. He goes to work and comes home at night, when one of his kids comes up to him and says, "I saw mommy kissing the neighbor's pee-pee." He slit each of his children's throats while they slept and cut his wife's head off. Left it on the kitchen table and smoked a cigarette calmly after calling 911 on himself. Said seeing the kids in their beds covered with open throats covered in blood fucked him up for a long time. I saw 4 guys blown away with an AK-47 that had a double drum clip. One guy's face looked like the Predator. I had a 9-person shooting another time. Last month I cut a lady down who hung herself from the 3rd floor balcony. The neighbors on the 2nd floor found her hanging outside their porch window when they woke up for work. I probably have been to at least 20 shootings. Not sure what the worst is. I have seen a few jumpers. The worst calls are children. I have seen a few killed by cars. Grossest calls are burns. Saw 2 people tied to chairs. One was shot. The house was set on fire. The one who lived was the one who was shot. That was a bad call. But, I am a firefighter, so I don't know if this counts. The op was asking cops. I know a guy who was a jail guard, and he also worked in TBS, the Dutch equivalent of a jail for people with severe mental health problems. There was this schizophrenic guy who was convinced he was a dog. Now that might just sound sad and pathetic, but the guy actually bit someone in the throat and shredded his jugular. He tried to do it in jail as well, and he now has to wear a muzzle 24/7. A guy high on dust, aka PCP, went over to his adult sister's house right before they left for a family birthday party. As the family is packing the car up, the guy remains behind in his 7-year-old niece's bedroom, still high on dust. His niece forgets something in her room and runs back upstairs into the apartment. As soon as she reaches the apartment, she hears a gunshot. She walks into her room and sees her uncle proned out on the floor, bleeding profusely from the back of his head. Brains all over her bedroom wall. The family calls 911. I show up, walk in and assume the guy is dead by lack of movement and loss of blood. Find the gun, make it safe, and out of nowhere, hear a huge deep breath and see the guy's chest moving. With half of his brain blown apart, the guy was still alive for at least 10 minutes but unresponsive. Medics transported to hospital where he died but donated his organs. In the end, it's the little girl who will live with that picture of her uncle for the rest of her life. It would be nice if you could take every kid out of every bad situation, so they have a fighting chance to live a normal life. I recently went on a ride-along and got to hear a number of stories that happened here in Portland. The absolute worst story was regarding a woman who had died in her home. The police arrived, cleared the home, and found the woman lying in her living room. The neighbors hadn't seen her for a while, so they believed she had been there for a number of days. She also had a dog, and when the dog got hungry, it started to eat her face. Her cheeks were gone, the skin around her neck and forehead. They started their regular procedures when Mike, the cop I rode along with, thought he heard something and examined her closer. She was breathing. It was faint, but she was absolutely breathing. A stroke, or some sort of brain aneurysm, had paralyzed her and taken her speech. She had to lay there and literally have her face eaten off her by a dog she couldn't feed. She died later in the ICU. No longer Leo, but was for 17 years. The worst case I came across was the murder of 2 young children, ages 8 and 2. Our good friends lived next door to my partner. We were pretty close to our friends, and at this time, my first daughter was born. One of the nice things about our friends was that we could get some really nice hand-me-down clothes from their 2-year-old daughter. One night my ex-wife received a phone call from our friend. She was in hysterics over an argument between her and her husband. They had gone to the bar, one thing leads to another, and etc. He had gone to his parents' house to cool down. She did not know what to do and wanted my advice. I told her everything would be okay and to let things calm down a bit. The usual fix to calm someone down immediately until you can go over and assess the situation when everyone is sober. The next day we went over, and they were talking by phone, hashing things out. Things seemed better without the alcohol. The next day, I received a call to go assist local FD on a structure fire with entrapment. Another officer was on the scene taking control of the scene, and one was in custody. Not my partner. I was working out on another squad. The structure fire was at our friend's house. My heart dropped. Both the 2-year-old and the 6-year-old died in the fire, and our friend was arrested in their murder. I talked to my partner later. He was very distraught over the entire thing. At the time, I knew nothing since I was not there, but assigned to traffic control. I asked him what had happened. He told me that he received a knock on his door and it was our friend. She told him her house was on fire and her children were in the bedroom. He ran and got his ladder, climbed up to the bedroom and busted out the window. He couldn't make it inside due to the heat. He then tried the front door and still could not make it up the stairs due to the heat. After learning about fire safety years later, I'm glad he couldn't make it into the room. He would have died too. The fire department arrived and was able to get the 2 children out, but it was too late. The firemen even said the temps were unbelievable hot in the room, and they had difficulties making entry because of it. During the investigation, I did not investigate but still heard about it. We learned that the rescue attempts were in vain. They were dead before our friend knocked on the door to my partner's house. Our friend continued to argue with her husband on the phone. At one point, he said if they got divorced, he would take custody of the children. Our friend went to the gas station and got some diesel. She had the children go to bed early and in the same bed. When they were asleep, she poured the diesel all throughout the room, down the hall, down the stairs, all the way to the front door. She lit the diesel and went to the side of the house closest to their room. She listened as her 2 children screamed for help, yelling "Mommy, Mommy." When the screaming and crying stopped, she went and knocked on my partner's door. She estimated she waited 30 minutes and even smoked a cigarette while she was waiting for her children to die. To this day, when I talk about this incident, I can't hold back the tears. I have talked about this numerous times when people ask what is the worst thing I have ever seen as a police officer. The aftermath was devastating for me also. After the autopsy, the young girl's lungs were placed in evidence in our evidence freezer. You could not see them. They were sealed in plastic, stored in a couple of metal tubes and marked as such. Every time I had to place or retrieve evidence from there, I had to see these containers. Also, at the time, my ex-wife and I were having our own problems. Then the letters started coming in. I found out they were writing to each other as she was awaiting trial. My ex even said she wants to go visit her. Some of it was for the curiosity of why she would do this and others to be supportive of her during this time. I couldn't believe this. The anger I had over what she had done was burning hotter than molten steel. When I found out what my ex was doing, it just took me beyond any anger I have ever felt. I could not understand and years later still can. And please don't explain her psyche to me or stick up for my ex. Just like those 3D photos of the 90s where the picture is a bunch of flowers, yet people see a sailboat. I just don't get it and truly don't want to. Anyways, as I said, my ex and I was already having problems, and this sent me over. I should have handled it better and been more adult, I know. But I lost all love and respect for her and started to do things a husband should not do. As you can tell, we are no longer together. It's not an excuse for my behavior. I own it 100%. As I said, I should have done things differently. Not my story but a friend's. He receives a call and responds about a single vehicle crash with only 1 survivor and 2 victims. Here's what happened. 3 high school students and childhood friends were driving to a gun range/firing area. The one in the back had a shotgun in his hands. They go over a pothole. The shotgun fires and instantly kills the driver. The driver's dead weight hits the gas, and they slam into a tree. The passenger, wearing no seat belt, is ejected through the windshield and impacts a tree, breaking his neck and crushing his skull. They were 2 weeks from graduating high school. The surviving friend now attends therapy, medicated, and has attempted suicide at least once. My father was I did body removals for the private ambulance company I worked at. We got a call at 4 a.m., and our dispatcher asked us if we had 2 body bags. We did. We got there, and the gist of it was that it was a double rape homicide of 2 elderly women in their 70s. One was found with her pants around her ankles in one room, and the other was found in the bedroom down the hall with her hands pinned above her head underneath the bed frame. I have no idea if they ever caught the guy. I just pick up the bodies and take them to the morgue. Pretty messed up, though. For 25 years, he's seen some shit in his time. Here's what he thinks was his worst crime scene: a domestic murder where a husband attacked and killed his wife with hammer blows to the head. She was discovered by her children, ages 4 and 7, who told their neighbors, who called the police. He was found on an industrial estate nearby, in his car, having expired through breathing exhaust fumes. Worst accident scene: a 7.5-ton goods vehicle lost control on a motorway, crossed all 3 lanes, went through the central reservation, hitting several vehicles on the opposite carriageway. One of these vehicles was a Mercedes Sprinter van. The impact flattened the Mercedes from the driver's side across the vehicle's back. The passenger walked away with a minor head injury. The driver's body had been stretched to approximately 9 feet long due to the impact force. The occupants of the 7.5-tonner were both dead, the impact being on the front driver's side corner diagonally across the cab. The driver was decapitated from his chin up. The passenger was decapitated from the middle of her nose up. Extracting the remains was an interesting experience. Probably the 4 suicides I've worked on. My very first, a man who had recently been diagnosed with terminal cancer, decided to prematurely end his life. He jumped in the early morning from a 5-story parking structure. He landed in such a way that his brain pretty much popped out of his head. When we found him, his brain was fully intact, but sitting in a puddle of blood exactly 23 feet from his body. He left a note apologizing to whomever finds my body and asking that his wife and daughter were cared for. The second, we got a suspicious circumstances call regarding a possible explosion next to a baseball stadium. It was a little after midnight. Upon arrival, and not seeing any smoke or flames, I got out and walked around. There were big tents set up for a game the next day. I saw what looked like a person sitting in a chair in the middle of a tent. I called out to him and he didn't answer. As I approached, I put my flashlight on him and nearly soiled myself. The top half of his head was just gone. I walked under the tent and noticed a shotgun sitting next to him. As I was calling it in, I felt something like rain hit the top of my head. I shined my flashlight up, and the inside of the top of the tent was absolutely coated with blood and brain matter. He did not leave a note. I still have nightmares about that one. The third, we got a report of a single gunshot in a field next to a church. I had a trainee at the time. It's about 2 o'clock. We drive next to the field and pretty quickly spotlight a body lying next to a lone tree. Pretty much the same thing as the last one. The top half of the head missing, single shot 12 gauge sitting next to the body. He had sat down, leaned against the tree, and put the shotgun in his mouth. Brains and various red goo all in the branches of the tree. No note. And the most recent one, an RA at a dormitory, had reported a bad smell to a maintenance worker. The maintenance worker keyed into a room on the 1st floor after knocking and getting no answer. He said when he opened the door, he recognized the smell and immediately called us. A paraplegic student had committed suicide by overdosing on prescription medication. We found him in his wheelchair with his head in the sink. Apparently, he was vomiting into the sink, and the sink had clogged up. His head was partially submerged in vomit, and, as the AC was off, he was very, very ripe. I couldn't seem to get that smell out of my uniform no matter how many times I washed it. He didn't leave a note, but we found out later he sent a text message to a girl he was fond of. She ignored it, thinking he was just being dramatic. The mental health care system in my state is severely broken, overburdened, and rife with bureaucracy.